Welcome back to another episode of Journey to Life with me, ArletteJones-Lawson, and my daughter and co-host, Constance Fields. This is part 2 of our 3-part series, The Black Woman Experience in America. And this is in honor of Black History Month in February, which we are in, yay. Our topic today will focus on respectability politics, African American Vernacular English, AAVE, versus Standard American English, SAE, and code switching. We are honored again today to welcome back Blaise, host of 2 YouTube channels, Hey, It's Me B, and The Secret Life of B. Welcome back, Blaise.
Thank you guys again for having me. I'm so excited to have this next conversation for part 2.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you're back with us to talk about this. These topics are so important to discuss, and I don't think people talk about it enough, not even in our own culture. So I'm excited that we get to have this discussion amongst us. Let's jump into respectability politics, specifically the history of it. So I had never heard the term really before. I knew what it was, but I had never heard the term. It actually was coined by a woman named Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham. And what it is, if you don't know anything about it, and you're new to this idea, it's this belief that marginalized communities have to adhere to the dominant cultural norms in order to receive respect. So one person may feel like they bear the weight of depicting an entire race or society or culture on their backs. Now, I'm referencing an article called Playing the Game of Respectability Politics on verywellmind.com. And the article talks about respectability politics being a dangerous and ineffective coping mechanism. It creates schisms between Black, Indigenous, people of color, also known as BIPOC, and the larger society, while also creating toxic situations within the respective community that allow marginalization to continue. And although it might seem helpful or advantageous to just assimilate into the dominant culture, there's little proof that shows that people will no longer be persecuted for doing so. So you may not get that respect that you think you're going to get. W.E.B. Du Bois actually has a quote where he says, "It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, 2 souls, 2 thoughts, 2 unreconciled strivings, 2 warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder." And over 100 years later, we're still dealing with that idea. It really spoke to me.
We really are, and I think that warrants a repeat. If you could repeat that again, because that's pretty powerful and enlightened, considering how long ago the quote was made.
Right. Yeah. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, 2 souls, 2 thoughts, 2 unreconciled strivings, 2 warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder.
Wow, that's really powerful. I mean, it really, really speaks to the internal struggle that we have, because we're like trying so hard to assimilate, and at the same time not being able to be ourselves fully. And so it's 2 sides that are always, kind of at war with each other inside of our bodies. And that's something that we as African Americans, we do that on a daily basis. I don't think that there's a day unless we're like at home, shut in, not interacting with anybody, that we're not we're not faced with that particular struggle.
Yeah. And it's this idea too that goes deeper than just us trying to, for a lack of a better word, fit into the dominant culture's norms, but also in our own Black culture, those levels there of how you're behaving or how you're presenting yourself versus how you present yourself at home. When you're just hanging out with your family or your friends, how you may be. And this gets into the code switching topic. It kind of blends together a little bit, but the politics of respectability is like, oh, that's a good Black person.
Right. That's a good representation of who we are.
Yeah.
And I think it's been like instilled in us from young, from our parents, from their parents, and further on, that when we go out, we're representing our family. It's, the thing where, we used to go places with my mama and she would have the talk that said, you better behave. And you know how to act. You better behave. Don't embarrass me. Don't embarrass us. And I think with Black respectability politics, it becomes even more pronounced, because then we feel like we're not only representing our family, like our whole family, like our grandparents and our ancestors, gonna be embarrassed if we act a certain way, if we show who we are, our genuine self, that somehow, it's going to be against the norm. Right. And I think that the whole thing with respectability politics is that, when we go out, we're representing our whole culture, our whole race. And that's a heavy load.
It is, and it's unfair. Like I've been in situations where we've taken the family out to dinner, and when the kids were a little bit younger, they would sit quietly, have dinner, we would talk or whatnot, but they weren't rowdy. They weren't, they were being respectful. We prayed before we ate. And more than once, I had white people come up to me and tell me at the restaurant, you're raising them right. They're so respectful. Your children are so polite and well-mannered. And I'm just like, okay, why did you feel the need to single my family out to tell me that? Like,
Yeah,
right.
Or they say like, you're so well-spoken. I'm like, were you expecting me not to be? Like,
Right. And it's like, did that person go up to every table and say, your child is so well behaved, your child is so, was it like an equal opportunity compliment?
Exactly.
Or did she just single your family out?
Because people don't realize this is like almost like survival for us, and this is something white people don't have to deal with. They're not doing stuff with the idea, oh, I'm going to make white people look bad if I do this, or I'm going to represent the whole white race if I don't do this. Like, right. For them, they can do essentially anything, make any decision, say anything, and they're not like put under the pressure of thinking, oh, this might make my whole race look bad, let me not say this or not do this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. And it almost feels like when you get compliments like that, and it's a nice compliment. Mm-hmm. It kind of goes back to when we were talking last time about microaggressions. And it's kind of a way of saying, okay, I'm giving you encouragement to continue the way that you are. Like, thank you for not showing who we think your children really are. Right. And so continue that way. So continue. Right. So I'm giving you your props. So continue on hiding parts of yourself, because that works.
Yeah, I wonder if that also has something to do with like the idea of the token Black person.
Yeah.
And like predominantly white situations and you're like, oh, well, that's Billy over there. He's, he's our Black guy, right? He doesn't
Right.
act like the other Black people out there, that's ours, and
Right.
I wonder if that has a similar thing to do with it,
Well, and it may, and one of the interesting things is, at work or any kind of social gathering, we always know that we might get called out, like we might get, chosen as, pointing out the example of not being racist. So we always have to like be on our toes, and ready, for somebody to say, hey, yeah, Arlette is on our team. Or, we always have to be ready for that. And so it's pressure kind of, in those environments.
Let's talk about the idea of playing the game of respectability politics. So in that same article, it goes on to talk about in a society, what you wear and how you speak and how your hair is, those are just a few ways that people can determine or may determine who they think you are. So that plays into what we've been talking about. This idea of, oh, because you wear your hair like an afro, you must be a militant Black person, and thus this means this about you. Whereas being a militant Black person is beautiful and important, there's so many things about that. Or relaxing our hair and all that stuff. And we'll get into that topic much later. Can't wait.
Right. Yeah. I'm excited about it. One of the things that I found in going to like social gatherings that may traditionally require, you to be well dressed. I've gone to gatherings and I've been like the dressiest person there. And, our Caucasian counterparts, are dressed down.
Yeah.
And
that's a good point.
And that's like totally accepted, totally acceptable, but we still feel like we have to present a certain way. Like if we present it in that same way, we're not going to be viewed in the same light.
Yeah. I have two things to add to that. One is, my dad had a really interesting conversation with my son, and he was saying how, he didn't like the fact that my son likes to wear sweatpants to school all the time. That's just what he likes to wear. All the kids wear sweatpants to school. And for him being in 6th grade, my dad was saying, you're not like other kids. You need to wear jeans when you go to school. You don't have to wear dress pants, but you need to look, presentable when you go to school. And my son was like, but I don't understand. I don't like jeans. Like, I'll wear some shorts, but that is a generational thing. And it's also a cultural thing where we feel like we have to teach them.
Well, and your son represents his grandfather. And that's a lot on his shoulders. I think that that things are changing because of our younger generations that are up and coming, because they don't really play that. You know what I mean? They like being in their skin. They like who they are. They like expressing themselves.
I also say, like, just us showing up is like a statement in itself to some people. Like, we can't just be ourselves. Like, if we show up with, like you said, an afro, oh, she must be like a extremist, like she, and then if we show up with relaxed hair, then to them we're making a statement of assimilation. So it's that's not something that non-Black people or white people have to deal with. That if they show up a certain way, then they're to other people making a statement.
Right. I would say the exception to that may be if a white person showed up with dreads, for instance.
Well, that's a negative thing.
But we're getting into the hair thing. And that was the other thing I was going to say had to do with Black hair. I'll save it for next show. I'll save it for the next show. So you'll have to come back and listen so that you hear what we have to say about that. But, you know, respectability politics with BIPOC and other historically marginalized groups attempt to appear acceptable to the dominant culture, and that carries an overwhelming weight. When you think about police brutality, hate crimes, and white supremacist propaganda as it grows, BIPOC people are increasingly pushing back against oppressive and outdated views of who they are and how they should behave. I think that that was a really poignant point that the article gave about it. It kind of ties everything up in a bow.
I think people need to realize that no matter how we present ourselves, how we talk to somebody, to like a racist person, we're still a Black person. So if you, you know, get pulled over and you obey everything the cop is saying and you do everything right, you still could be in danger, just as much as somebody, you know, running away. So
that's a really good point. And one of the supervisors that I worked with years ago was talking about an experience that they had had where they were in some kind of committee with you know, a group of people. It was like a subcommittee. I don't know how many members, maybe 5 or 6 members, and there was one African American there. And he would always kind of show up like right on time or a little bit late. And then, you know, they would kind of touch bases when they got home. And, you know, he always reached out like much later than everybody else reached out. And you know, and she asked him about that. And he said, well, in this particular area, I tend to be pulled over a lot more often. And so, and she's like, but for what? And he's like, for driving while Black. And she's like, but look, you have a right to say, wait a minute, why am I being pulled over? What have I done? And he was like, yeah, you have a right to say, what have I done? Tell me what the probable cause is. But I don't have that right. I cannot speak up and even ask the question because it's going to be viewed as hostile. It's going to be viewed as, you know, questioning the authority. And that might get me killed.
Right.
And so it's not the same. Yeah, you know, Caucasians can respond to things a lot, you know, with a lot more pull behind them. They can you know, rely on the law and, you know, well, the law says this, or, you know, or this is your right to do X, Y, Z, but we can't. We
Right.
have to always be mindful that to speak up, you know, might be the difference in us getting home alive or not.
Yeah, that sounds like a lesson too that you start learning early on when you're part of the Black community.
Yeah.
And still, I find myself having moments where I'm, you know, that the advocate, you know, like, oh, I would have said this and I would have done this, but realistically,
no. And it's
No.
kind of, you know, and you know, when we hear, you know, when we're around other African Americans, and you know, we tell them what happened on this traffic stop or what, you know, then you'll have somebody, usually it's somebody a little younger, that'll say, oh, you didn't have to put up with that. If it had been me, I would have said X, Y, Z. And then we tend to chuckle and to kind of laugh at it because it's almost laughable.
Right.
Like, A, no, you wouldn't have. And B, if you would have, you might not be here telling me that. You know what I mean? It's just the reality. So I'm gonna move on into the end of Black respectability politics. And I'm gonna reference an article from Talking Points. goes on to say that Black respectability politics describes African American self-policing morality, and in order to better reflect themselves in the white mainstream. And we've learned how to adapt to mainstream etiquette, values, dress codes, hairstyles, and preferred media. But Black respectability politics is more than self-help and discipline. It's like living your life as a job interview forever. Mm-hmm. It is a state of always striving to impress and never arriving at the promised land of equality. In order to be equal to whiteness, we have to take it upon ourselves to do more to counteract that feeling that we are less than. What do y'all think about that?
I think that that is so true. There's so many examples of feeling like we have to fit in, or we need to fit in to get ahead. We need to dress a certain way or style our hair a certain way. This is how a CEO looks. Mm-hmm. You know, this is, you know, CEO might look like they have long, straight hair. So we get the wigs and we do this and that, you know. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not taken away from people who wear wigs because they love it. Some people just love to change their hair up. There's nothing wrong with that. No. And there's nothing wrong with people who decide to, you know, insert themselves into situations where they're spending more money, so you're around more white people. You know, that the Black luxury, Black girl luxury, the whole movement, you know, those are white spaces predominantly. There's nothing wrong with us asserting ourselves into those spaces.
Yeah, one part of the quote that was said before was that, like, we do all this striving to impress and never arriving at the promised land of equality. I think that's like a really big part of that quote, because it is like almost like whatever we do in the back of our minds, we know that we still are at like a disadvantage than everyone else, even if we are behaving at the same level as them, wearing the same clothes as them, you know, going to the same schools as them. It's really disheartening, you know?
A lot of us have been raised on the notion of, now you've got to work harder and you've got to be better than anybody else. And so we all, for the most part, know that we can't, like, you tell us that we need to do A, B, and C. Well, we know we have to do D as well. Mm-hmm. Right. To even come close to standing out. It's like, no matter, you know, what you do, you know, you're always gonna be the, you know, the Black person in the room.
I just want to ask you, like, have you guys ever felt also like strangely like observed when you go into a store and you feel like they think you're stealing, so you make it a point that, like, you grab something very visibly so that they know that you're holding it in your hand, so they know you're not putting anything in your pocket. And it just it feels like, I wonder if other people have to have that same worry that we do when we walk into a store.
I don't know that they do. And I mean, and walking into the store, speaking about that, you know, you always want to talk loudly so that they know what the conversation is. Mm-hmm. Oh, I think this is a nice blouse. I'm thinking about, honey, do you think I should get this blouse? It's really pretty. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna hold it on, and we'll take it up to the register when we finish shopping. I mean, you want to.
I did that for my son once. He was looking around at something, and I could feel eyes on us. And I said, well, he was holding something, and I said, well, if you're gonna buy it, go ahead and buy it. You know,
exactly. It's like you want to announce, you know, what you do. It's like our life is being narrated by us. Like, you know, okay, we're getting ready. We probably should. We're gonna buy. Okay, I think we've done enough. We've done enough damage. Time to check out. Mm-hmm. You know, it's kind of like here we come.
It's like a result. Yeah, it's like a result of experiencing, like, being followed in a store just because you're Black. So in a way, because of those experiences, I almost feel like I am a criminal, even though I have no intentions to do anything criminal-like.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. And if you are accused of something, you know, you feel like you have to have evidence, you know, that you didn't do what it is you're being accused of. So it's like that whole respectability politics, you know, because some people have done criminal things and been legitimate criminals in our race, that somehow that, you know, that's something that we carry on ourselves, you know, like, oh, because they did it, now they gonna think, oh, we all are criminals. And so we all behave in ways to try to prove that that's not what we're getting ready to do.
And that's unfortunate that we are in that space to do that. Like, I announce when I'm leaving, or I say bye to the clerks. If I go into a store that I know I'm not going to buy anything in, I'll walk around and I'll be like, oh, this is nice. Oh, I would love this. And then I'll be like, okay, have a great day. Thank you.
Exactly.
You know?
And you want, you know, you want to be like, when you walk out, you want, you know, your pocketbook visible, you know, we usually do something with our hands to prove that we don't have anything in our hand, you know, whether it's touching our hair or, you know, straightening up our clothes, something to let them know we're leaving and we didn't shoplift.
Yeah,
you know?
That's why I hate going into stores that I don't buy anything in, because that's the type of anxiety that I feel. Like, I almost wish I had found something that I wanted to buy, so I don't have to deal with walking out the store with nothing and like potentially being accused of stealing.
Yeah. I want to move on to further on in the article. It talks about when some of us fail at this task of Black respectability politics. When some of us fail at this task, we chastise our own as bringing down the race. And that mentality has been a long-held Black respectability political party line that African-American community leaders, politicians, and media barons have kind of held us to. But hip hop, the Black community's widening gap, and now Cosby's very public demise may have killed BMP. Black respectability politics. It's about keeping up with the Joneses, about outward displays of social improvement. And, you know, these are shows that shows like Cosby Show and Different World and Different Strokes, you know, those were all shows that were, you know, that our Black leaders hoped that that's how we would be seen, that's how we presented ourselves. You know, Bill Cosby was one of the most popular BRP representatives. At its apex, The Cosby Show pulled in 30 million viewers every week. It was the first show with an African-American cast that was ranked #1 for 5 consecutive years. Only 2 shows have done that in the history of TV. Cosby had the perfect resume to assume his cultural responsibility. He was a noted civil rights activist, contributor to many African-American organizations, and America's most popular dad, armed with G-rated jokes on parenting, getting good grades, and staying drug-free. Now, in 2014, BRP just may have died of its wounds with the diminishment of this main spokesperson, Bill Cosby. And I want to talk about that a little more in depth, because I know that when I was younger and the Cosby Show came out, I mean, I remember that I didn't do anything that interfered or got close to the time the Cosby Show was going to come on, because that was an African-American family that spoke to more of who we really are as a whole. A Black doctor, a Black lawyer, raising kids that have experiences that we've all kind of experienced in some form or fashion. And it was like, you know, it made me feel like, oh, they know. they know how we really are. That's who we really are in our homes. I mean, those are the conversations that I have with my parents, you know, and it was just such a source of pride because we had this man representing our culture. Everybody loved the show, and everybody felt, you know, the greatness of having this wholesome Black family representing us.
Right.
And then in finding out the timetable and the timeline of what he was actually doing at the same time that he was presenting himself this way, it just was like his demise, you know, just kind of took a knife to the heart of our Black culture.
Mm.
And the reality is he is one man that did horrible things. And he doesn't represent me. He doesn't represent my family. But that feeling that he did and what he did to more than the folks that he abused. And he did it more than to just him and his career and his family. He did it to all of us. And it's that feeling that we have to like fight against. And what do y'all think?
Yeah, but I mean, you know, I think the Cosby Show was prominent when I was growing up as well. But I think that looking back at the show itself, it could be looked at from a couple of different angles. You know, one, yes, it was an amazing representation of the middle class Black family, you know, the way in which we interact with each other, we interact in our households, what other Black culture or other Black families may strive to be like, you know, those sort of things. But also, I feel like the flip side of that is that they were a digestible family for non-Black people. You know, they were the good Black family. This is who you should be. You should be like Claire Huxtable. You know, why are you not like Claire Huxtable? You know?
Right.
And so it just was very digestible for white people, I think. And speaking specifically to Bill Cosby's point, he was a digestible comedian for them. He was a safe comedian for them. And so whenever you have this idea of the safe Black person, it's always easier for us to assimilate or to find some common relatability. But
I think that's because we have to. I don't think we have a choice.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the choice was taken away from us. We have to present. Yeah. And to your point, Constance, he was digestible. He was, and so when we moved out into the world after an episode of the Cosby Show, you know, there was this sense that we were digestible. We were acceptable. Yeah. So like we felt like when people saw us, they didn't just see the thug. They also saw respectability.
Right.
Another example of this is, I would say, most recently, I think it was last year, with Will Smith and the slap. I mean, I would consider Will Smith also another pretty digestible celebrity for like the white mainstream audience.
Oh yeah.
And so he spent his whole career doing nothing offensive and being somebody that, you know, white people were okay with being a fan of. And so the minute he does something wrong, it's almost like they were more offended than any of the other horrible things that other white celebrities that are still invited to these award shows, by the way, they haven't been banned like him, but they still are like out here supporting them. But then with him, it was almost like they felt they were like slapped in a way. And I mean, you can have your thoughts on like what happened and how you think about him or whatever, but I feel like the reaction to him was a bit shocking, the way people were so like taken aback by the slap and felt like, well, now you just ruined, you know, everyone's opinion on like Black actors or, you know, Black people in general. And I just don't think that's exactly fair to really us or him, because in reality, like white celebrities have done a lot worse and are still here. And we're not saying, oh, well, that they just ruined it for white actors, they ruined it for white directors, they ruined it for white people, you know?
It overshadowed the fact that we had that two of the hosts were African Americans, that the producer of the Oscars that year was an African American. It totally just, you know, overshadowed that. And it was kind of, you know, it was, I know as an African American woman, there was a part of me that felt like, now, what in the world did he go and do? Because, you know, this was a moment. We did have an African American producer. We did have two of the three hosts African Americans. And there were, you know, African Americans that were honored that night. And what did he go and do? His actions overshadowed that. He just messed the whole thing up. And he didn't mess the whole thing up. You know, people still got awarded. The show was still a great show. But nobody remember. The only thing people really remember is the slap. And that's, you know, that's respectability politics.
I was going to add that I think that is a very polarizing situation as well for the Black community, because you know, some of us felt like you did, and some of us felt like, well, yeah, he should have stood up for his woman and did that, and he showed these people sitting in these chairs that don't look like us that you can't just say whatever you want, you know, and disrespect us. So it was very polarizing in that way for us as a culture. But when you said, now, why did he go and do that? You know, it brought to mind this idea of how Black people are shown on the news. But it just triggered something in my mind because, you know, there's this cycle. I actually wrote a paper about this in school, but there's this cycle of the media showing a Black criminal, somebody who did something wrong, they're showing their face, and that instilling a sense of fear or an idea in the audience who is watching it. And thus, whenever the person is on the street that are not Black, let's say a white woman, and they see a Black man approaching them, they may clutch their purse. And then the police then are, you know, watching out for more Black people doing stuff, you know, and so there's this whole cycle. So whenever I hear a story, I used to do this all the time, I don't really do it anymore, but whenever I would hear a story on the news of a crime that happened, I'd be like, please don't be Black. Please don't be Black. And then they showed a picture and I'm like, dang it, you know, you know,
and there's a story that I read about yesterday, in fact, of a little girl. I don't know, she was like maybe 10 or 11 years old. And in her science class, I guess they were doing like a special project. And so they're in their state or city, there's a particular type of insect that's like really doing damage to their trees. And so she's lived in this neighborhood for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, literally across the street from her Caucasian neighbor, an older person. And so she went out, and with her, I guess, notebook and her little jar that she was collecting the insects. So she was going like from different trees, and when she found them, putting them in the jar, you know, kind of her way of collecting the data and the evidence that she needs to prove, yes, those insects, you know, are on, I don't know, ever how many out of how many trees. So yes, this particular insect is very prevalent in our area. So she was doing that. And so she was going around, and this man, her white neighbor, called the police and said, there is an African-American woman prowling around our area and looks threatening. And so the police came out. Well, when the police came out, Mama came out. And then the little girl was like, well, what did I do wrong? And both the police officer and the mother said at the same time, nothing. And so the police explained that he was called because of this neighbor. And the mom's like, we've lived across the street from him for 9 years. You know, but that just goes to show that he never saw her.
Right.
All he ever saw was color. Because there's no mistaking that this little African-American girl, she's small, would ever be mistaken for a Black woman. You know what I mean?
He didn't see her.
He didn't see.
And that, I think that is a lot of our experiences. We don't feel like we're seen. And that's why respectability politics is so exhausting, because we want to be seen for who we are, how we decide to express ourselves, you know, and what we wear, how we talk, how we walk, you know, and it does not mean that we are any less capable or any less intelligent. You know, you could be a Harvard scholar and be a neurosurgeon and still be like down with the homies, like, what's up, you know? Or, you know, I wear my hair naturally curly, you know? And so that's a really poignant statement that he didn't see her.
So the article goes on to talk about the first major blow to Black respectability politics happened towards the end of the decade of the 1980s. And for the older generation of African-American leaders, it was Blaxploitation on steroids. The music was reaching the target audience. And the thing is, to the newer generations, even then it was starting, to the newer generation, respectability reads hollow and manipulative. You know, it just it reads different, you know, and I think there's the younger generation are a little more comfortable standing in their individuality. What do you all think about that?
I think it's true, for sure. I mean, Blaise can speak more to it because she's closer to the younger generation. but you know, I think we both would agree that people are more interested in expressing themselves and living authentically than being concerned with being proper.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, my generation's not really interested in playing that game anymore. And I think that's why there sometimes is some disagreements with the older generation, like, oh, you're wearing your hair natural, or, oh, you're listening to rap music. And so I think that's definitely changing now.
Yeah.
And when it comes to music, with, you know, I think we were going to talk about it a little bit later, but with the whole idea of Black women in hip hop, and how a lot of Black women, Black female hip hop artists or rappers are very sex positive. And I think that for the older generation who are still in that space of respectability politics, it's what are you doing? Like, they already think this about us, you know, why are you doing this? And to a different generation, it's, we are expressing ourselves. I imagine it's what they felt in the 60s, maybe, when, you know, the whole peace and love, and, you know, it was a hippie, and, you know, I'm sex positive and my body and all this stuff. And meanwhile, you have parents and grandparents like,
horrified.
Yeah.
Horrified. Absolutely. And, you know, I am part of the older generation, and, you know, I must admit, you know, I see some of these, you know, artists, you know, Megan Thee Stallion, who's great, at her craft. And even Lizzo, who I do love, dressing very provocatively. And it's like, ooh, are you, okay, you dressing like that. All right. I'm having to talk myself, kind of down from that respectability ledge and say, yeah, that's a great artist though. That's a great artist. And this is how she's presenting herself. And, if she feels at home in her skin, hey, that's the way we all should strive to be. I want to finish the whole end of respectability politics and bringing up President Obama. Perhaps the article says Obama would single-handedly be able to overcome 400 years of America's criticism of the Black body and mind by just being perfect. We all know how this hypothesis has played out. Despite the brilliant speeches, the painstaking compromises, foreign policy successes, legislative achievements, and to some, the most objectively successful president in Americans' history. He is still unpopular with vast sections of the white America. If a Black man like Obama is still hated by almost half the population, then what hope is there for the average middle-class family, single mother, teenage kid with a hoodie, the creative artist who likes to provoke, or the philosopher who proposes change?
It's true that that statement alone that the article pointed out is basically saying you're not gonna fit in the way that they're not going to ever, it's not gonna be like that. And I think too, with President Obama, some Black people expected him to be essentially speak for the whole Black race and be doing all these things. And he still had to play the game himself. It's not like the whole, Senate and House were comprised of all Black people. Like, he had to play the game too.
He represented the whole United States. He knew he represented more than African American folks.
Exactly.
Okay, so next we're going to be talking about African American Vernacular English, otherwise known as AAVE, versus Standard American English, otherwise known as SAE. And I'll be taking quotes from the article by AfroPunk. I'm is talking right. So what is AAVE? So AAVE is a dialect used by Black people in social settings that pervades hip hop culture, while SAE is the dialect generally taught in schools. And most people across racial lines do not speak Standard American English in general, but yet AAVE is the most stigmatized alternative and the most debated. And so, I think one thing people kind of got used to referring to AAVE as is slang. I think it's important that it's not slang. It can have slang within AAVE, but there's slang in every single language, in every single dialect. And so, after the Civil Rights Movement, many upper middle class Black people denounced the use of AAVE, calling it improper and uneducated, while working class Blacks called the users of SAE assimilationists. And this has hardly changed even now. And so, many people consider AAVE to be bad English, but like I said before, it is not bad English. It is just a different dialect and language. And so there was many studies done in the 70s to the present that have classified AAVE as a dialect of English or its own language, resulting from a combination of English words and Negro-Congo rooted grammar. So, AAVE has its own words, its own syntax and rules. And it's also rich in Black culture. And so, I just want to talk about AAVE and our experiences with AAVE and, how we feel speaking AAVE, if we're comfortable speaking AAVE, if we feel judged speaking AAVE, whether we speak AAVE in our personal settings and casual settings, or if we're willing to speak it at work.
I do sometimes. I do it when I feel comfortable. If I feel safe enough to, I allow that part of me to show. but then other times I just don't think about it and it just shows up. So, it just may be in how I just drop my guard for a moment and I'm just like, you ain't finna go out there, just little things like that. But I definitely feel more comfortable speaking that way, speaking AAVE amongst family and friends.
The woman that became famous for saying, "Ain't nobody got time for that." Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It was definitely AAVE, but we all understood what she meant. Mm-hmm. I do not have time for that mess. You know what I mean? Get away from me with that foolishness. Right. I don't have time for it. We all understood what it meant. And I think that at work, I'm not comfortable. In the work setting, I would never use AAVE. And I can get kind of thrown off. I don't know if y'all have experienced it when somebody white comes up and they're using AAVE. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of like, huh? Like, what? Wait, what?
Well, I mean, I know for me personally, I'm working like remotely and I'm the only Black person, honestly, the only person of color at my job. And I kind of like toned down the AAVE. But I noticed something interesting that like most of them use like slang and AAVE. And it's like one person like was like, "Oh, that's so ghetto." I'm just like, what? Right. Like, because if I said that, y'all would call me unprofessional. I'm pretty sure. But so it's interesting to me that non-Black people and white people especially feel more comfortable saying AAVE in a work setting when they're trying to be funny or something. But like if we say it, it's like, oh, that's just who you are, that's how you talk. Right. Almost like they're making a caricature of it. Yeah. And it's like something humorous in that way. So now that's not to say that a lot of things we say aren't funny.
I think a lot of AAVE is shortening. Like instead of using 10 words in a sentence, shorten it up to 2 or 3. Yeah. It's like, look, I can get my point across by saying 2 or 3 words. I do not need to use the 12 that you are accustomed to. Right.
Yeah, and that doesn't take away from our professionalism.
I also want to point out here this last section of the article, and that AAVE is a product and reservoir of Black culture, but speaking AAVE does not make you Black. Mm-hmm. And so I think, AAVE has become associated with authenticness of Blackness, but it's almost like a pressure for some of us to adopt it to feel Blacker. And, I'm pretty sure some people, listening or watching might have experienced, being called like an Oreo or being told, oh, you talk white, you sound white. Mm-hmm. And so they might feel pressured to speak AAVE, even if that's not even like natural to them. They didn't ever grew up speaking it, but they feel like they need to because they want to fit in with the Black community or they want to be better accepted.
And it makes me think too, not just AAVE, but like our style in which we speak sometimes when we communicate with each other.
Yeah. At the end of the day, speaking AAVE doesn't make you Black, whether or not you're Black or not.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Well, and you don't, and it doesn't, speaking AAVE doesn't, if you're not African American, doesn't come with the whole package. Racism. It doesn't come with all of that. It just comes with the language. So let's move on into the last topic, which is code switching. And I've heard me personally, have heard the phrase code switching. And in preparation for this podcast, I was amazed at how little I really knew about code switching. So I think it's a great and important topic that we bring up, and it goes along with the other 2 topics that we discussed. I'm going to reference an article from hbr.org, and it says, Broadly, code switching involves adjusting one's style of speech, appearance, behavior, and expression in ways that will optimize the comfort of others in exchange for fair treatment, quality service, and employment opportunities. Research suggests that code switching often occurs in spaces where negative stereotypes of Black people run counter to what are considered appropriate behavior and norms for a specific environment. For example, research conducted in schools suggests that Black students selectively code switch between standard English in the classroom and AAVE with their peers, which elevates their social standing with each intended audience. We also see examples of guidelines encouraging Black people to code switch to survive police interactions, such as acting polite and respectable when stopped, and avoiding running even if you are afraid. Based on our research, this article continues to say, and work of others, they argue that code switching is one of the key dilemmas that Black employees face around race at work. And while it is frequently seen as critical for professional advancement, code switching often comes at great psychological cost. Finally, it says, however, it invokes into another strategy of suppressing aspects of one's cultural identity and assimilating to boost others' comforts. What do y'all think about that?
It's exhausting.
I'm noticing a lot with this newer generation, like Gen Z, that they're less willing to code switch. They're like, well, I'm not going to, code switch. It's just who I am, which I think is really interesting because I feel like code switching was very common for, millennials and older generations.
And I think that the younger generation, they haven't had that practice. They haven't had the workout in switching. They mostly know what it feels like to be themselves in their own skin. And fortunately, they're raised by parents who are tired of the code switch.
Mm-hmm.
And they're raising their kids, our kids, to be individuals, to be yourself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I saw this online a few days ago, but someone had mentioned that some people, when they do code switching, it's almost like a, customer service voice. And they're like, the customer service voice is void of all personality and character. And that is really a huge difference. For us speaking naturally, there's so much character in, but when we adopt a quote unquote white voice or just simply code switching, it's we take away all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's we're always questioning whether what we've said was understood.
Yeah, I love the way that this new generation is, how comfortable they are, like you said, in their skin, and how willing they are to be themselves at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like they're teaching us so much,
Mm-hmm.
in that way.
Well, I'm going to finish the article with, they say, if leaders are truly seeking to promote inclusion, and address social inequality, they must begin by understanding why a segment of their workforce believes that they cannot truly be themselves in the office. Then they should address what everyone in the company needs to do to change this. The key to our own success is to not hide any of it and leverage it in whichever way that you see best. You can't do that leaving part of your past behind, leaving part of who you are behind.
All right, so this has been a really amazing discussion on code switching and everything that we've talked about today. There is an article called The Cost of Code Switching, 3 Main Reasons People Code Switch in the Workplace. And it's on hbr.org. But the first reason, they say, for Black people and other racial minorities, downplaying membership in a stigmatized racial group helps increase perceptions of professionalism and the likelihood of being hired. 2, avoiding negative stereotypes associated with Black racial identity helps Black employees be seen as leaders. And then 3, expressing shared interests with members of dominant groups promotes similarity and with powerful organizational members, which raises the chance of promotions because individuals tend to affiliate with people they perceive as similar. At the same time, we know that code switching comes with social and psychological repercussions. Whenever you downplay one's racial group, it can generate hostility from in-group members, increasing the likelihood that those who code switch will be accused of acting white, which we did talk about. And seeking to avoid stereotypes is hard work and can deplete cognitive resources and hinder performance. Pretending to have commonality with coworkers also reduces authentic self-expression and contributes to burnout. And I think that might be the key that this younger generation is figuring out. They don't want to be burnt out. And so it's exhausting to pretend to be anything other than yourself.
I think people need to realize that code switching in itself is part of survival. And so we shouldn't be making other Black people feel bad that they're code switching, or make them feel like they're not as Black as people that do or that don't code switch. But, I do think we should all strive to be ourselves more in the workplace whenever we can.
Definitely.
Whichever way you're more comfortable, whichever way you switch and that you're more comfortable, that's the lane you should live in. There is hope for our future. The article says, the newest generation entering the workforce has absolutely no tolerance for not being accepted fully, period. And if you are a company that wants to continue doing business in 2023, you're going to have to hire someone, more than likely new talent, entering the workforce. And they believe that the newest generation has ushered in a new level of freedom when people can express themselves more fully and feel comfortable to not be retaliated against for their culture or their swag.
I love that. Well said.
Me too.
This has definitely been one of the most interesting podcast episodes that we've done. I can't wait for the next one. We have so much more to get into when it comes to entertainment and radio, television and film. But I love every aspect of the discussion we had today. I feel like we covered a wide array of things that we don't normally talk about, but you would think we do talk about it. We talk about it, not talk about it. So thank you all for this conversation today. And I hope that you all listening and watching got something out of it, whether you learned something new or you can identify with what we're saying. Feel free to drop it in the comments and let us know, send us a message and let us know your thoughts about what you heard today and what you saw today.
Thank you all for listening, and please join us on our next episode, which is part 3. And so we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.